Yeah, whenever you're ready.
Okay, I'm recording.
All right.
And we're live. Welcome to Two Broke Game Devs. That's right, Two Broke Game Devs. That name has never been truer for me. I'm so broke. My God. Chris, are you broke? Nah, you're Mr. Rockefeller.
Only in spirit. Only in spirit. That's it.
Chris has left two. It's now just one broke game dev. And Mr. Rockefeller over here is okay.
Wow. People make advancements in their lives. And
you know what? He deserves it, though. He deserves the success. He works very hard. He deserves it. We'll hide him. When it comes time to eat the rich, we'll hide him.
But seriously, though, like, okay, yes, an extra couple $1,000s a year. And I am now eligible to be eaten by the rest of the people.
He's running a risk. He's living a good life, but when the revolution comes, will they recognize his background? It's hard to say.
I will fund the revolution with my extra dollar. With my extra dollar an hour.
Speaking of revolutions, we just watched a revolutionary TV show. Actually,
Seriously?
It's not that revolutionary. It was very good, but it's not revolutionary. Maybe that's a bit much to put on it. However, it was very, very good, just like its predecessors. That's right. We're talking about Midnight Mass by Mike Flanagan. This is going to be a very spoiler-heavy episode. Spoiler-heavy. We're going to talk about everything. You're going to know absolutely everything and every theory, and you're going to know everything. So if you haven't watched it, you want to watch it, you want to go and clean, which I recommend. I really recommend. The reveal is really powerful. Stop listening now.
Go watch it.
We're going to dive right into it.
Yeah.
We're going to dive right into it. Chris,
this is
tell
your
us about
turn.
Midnight Mass.
Well, this is when the people that haven't watched the show go over to my YouTube channel instead, and then they start watching all the videos that I have there so that I can start generating some views. So please, if you haven't watched the show, go ahead and do that. But if you're here for the spoilers because you already watched it or you just don't care, let me tell you one thing. This episode is the frog to our podcast science class that we're going to be dissecting the shit out of this. And so Midnight Mass, it just came out not long ago, but again, one of the greatest advantages of Netflix, you can just binge watch the whole thing if you have the time. If not, take it easy. But yeah, so I started watching the show before you did, actually. And so I got through it, and I think I was like, well, I actually finished it before you did as well. And throughout the entire time, all I kept thinking was our common shared love for the topic that Midnight Mass is all about, right? And it was so hard for me to hold back and not be like, you have to sit down and watch it right now and watch all of it, because if you don't, I'm gonna explode, because I really need to tell you and talk about this show with someone. And sure enough, then you sat down and started watching, and then you really liked it, and then you watched it again, with your family, and you guys finished it. So I don't think I've ever been as happy to hear you say, oh yeah, we started talking about the ending and all of that. And I was just like, man, we have to do an episode on this show, because it is just such a good show. So yeah, let's start with the basics. So Midnight Mass, available on Netflix. One of the biggest things about this show is how long it's actually been, quote unquote, in the making, because for those of you who don't know, Mike Flanagan, one of the first things that he did with Netflix, he's now the Netflix horror guy, or, go-to guy. But he actually started with, I believe, the first movie that he did for Netflix exclusively was Hush, which is about this deaf girl who, is stalked by a killer, and like she has to endure the struggle, the power struggle that comes with trying to defend your life from him, etc. It's a really good movie. It's an effective horror movie. But anyway, so this movie came, I think, like 4 or 5 years ago, I think. And that was one of the first things that were like Netflix exclusive. And Flanagan, actually, when he first approached Netflix, he said he wanted to do Midnight Mass way back when they first worked on that movie. And Netflix was like, nah, we're not really interested in that. But here's another project that we really want to put out on the service. And so anyway, they hired him to do Hush. And so Flanagan, being Flanagan and having such a great attention to detail, in Hush, there's actually a scene where the girl who plays Bev on Midnight Mass, she's actually the deaf girl's friend in Hush. she comes over to give her a book back. The girl in the show, the deaf girl in the show, she's a writer. And so her friend comes back to her house to give her her book back that she just finished. And the book just happens to be Midnight Mass. So there's two scenes in that movie where, you know, she hands the book. You see the front cover of the book says Midnight Mass. And then she puts it down and you see the back of the book. And it's like a synopsis of what Midnight Mass is all about. So you actually get a preview of what the show is all about on the back of the book. But obviously way back when, nobody really knew what Midnight Mass even was. So that's the first spoiler. And then there's not spoiler, but that's the first Easter egg. And then when Mike Flanagan went to direct Gerald's Game, which is the Stephen King's novel adaptation, when the protagonist, she finds herself in a bind, tied up to a bed, she's trying to reach for something above her while she's tied to the bedpost. And one of the things that the camera focuses on is her hand, but as her hand moves along the shelf above her, there's a book there. It's called Midnight Mass. So that's another appearance of Midnight Mass, right? And so again, this show has kind of been in the workings and like in the lore of the Flanagan universe since he started. And now finally Netflix was like, you know, when Flanagan went back to them and he said, "Hey, I wanna finally do this," they got the script, they read the story. And everyone at Netflix was like, why the hell did we take so long to actually bring this to production? This is really good. So finally, this year, the show got made, and then this year it released. It's just kind of interesting to see it come along. And I kind of wonder, is the show better because it waited this long to be made and released? But I'm also curious to know, what would Midnight Mass would have been if it had come out when Flanagan first wanted to make it, right? So that's a very interesting question to me. I definitely think the show is better because they waited this long. Flanagan kind of polished a lot of his directing skills for this show, so it's definitely a good thing. But I'm also curious to know what it would have been otherwise.
I'm very glad it came out when it did, because I'd be worried that the priest would not have been the priest. The actor who plays the priest.
Oh, and he is phenomenal.
Yeah. Hamish Linklater?
Yeah.
Oh, it's quite the name. I've never seen this guy before, or I might have, but I've never really seen him before until this. But yeah, Hamish Linklater. It's quite the name. I'd be worried that he wouldn't have been the priest. And I think a lot of the show, we'll talk more about it later, but I think a lot of the show hangs off of his shoulders. A lot of the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Before we get into our theories about and talk about what the show is about, because we'll quickly give like a very high level recap of kind of what the show's about. But before we get into that, if you're still listening, you've probably already seen it. You probably already know the twists and what it's about. So, Chris, for you, is Midnight Mass horror? Is it a horror show?
No, it's not. Not to me. I think it's a love story with horror elements. Very heavy, well spaced out horror elements. But at its very core, yeah, I would not consider this a horror show. I would say it's just, you know, it's a love story from different angles. It's a love story of multiple people, actually. But it is, in the end, at its very core, a love story. Much like Bly Manor was, to me, also a lot more dramatic and romantic than, say, Hill House. It seems like he's progressing from hardcore horror to more matured, less horror-like themes, but he still likes to sprinkle that aspect into it. So no, to me, it's not. What about you? Do you think it's horror?
Yeah, actually, I have the complete opposite opinion of you.
Interesting.
In this, so I actually do think it's horror, because the reveal, the monster, you cannot take out of the story and have the story make sense. It is integral to the whole thing. If the monster doesn't exist, the show can't really work. Whereas I think Hill House and Bly Manor, you could easily make the argument, less with Bly Manor, but definitely Hill House, you can easily make that argument that you can remove all the ghosts,
all the supernatural
and
stuff.
it's just a story about mental illness and how it affected this family.
Yeah.
And the ghosts don't matter to the story at all. They're not integral. You can take that out completely, and it's a good show just on the mental illness that affected this family. Whereas Midnight Mass, maybe you could do that with the first 3 episodes-ish, but the last 4 episodes are very much horror. If it's not for the reveal, if it's not for the pivotal monster, the show doesn't work. Nothing that happens next makes sense. You absolutely have to have the monster for the show to finish. So that's why I would classify this more as horror. It's not horror in like, I don't know, like a Mama or Hereditary or Paranormal Activity sense. Definitely not. But I would still say, compared to Hill House and Bly Manor, which can work without the ghost, this one cannot work without. And Chris, should we do the reveal?
Go ahead.
The vampire.
Oh.
It can absolutely not work without the vampire. The vampire is pivotal to everything that happens after the 3rd episode.
That apparently, it's kind of like a polarizing thing too. I've talked to people who were very pleased, like you and myself, we're both pleased that the reveal was a vampire, like a vampire story. But I've also heard from like a couple of people that they were like, really, a vampire? Like, that doesn't feel original. And I think that comes from the fact that his previous shows in movies have been very much so, like you said, a very thinly veiled horror aspect that can be easily taken out, and you still have a very solid story. Whereas with this one, the fact that it relies on the vampire kind of almost like cheapens the theme itself, but not really, because it's just so well done.
In a way, I think it makes it more fun, and it definitely makes it more like uncomfortable. At least for me, I love vampire stuff, but I never, not because I like vampires. Actually, I like vampires as the enemy. I always want to kill the vampires, even good ones like Alucard from Castlevania. He's still a vampire, still a predator. You gotta kill it. They're like wasps, right? Hornets. They don't contribute to the environment. They only kill. So you gotta take care of them. So I was very pleased with it. I liked the theme. I really loved the way the reveal was done. But I do think it took a little, now it's still really well done, but I do think it took a little bit away from the impact of the themes that it was dealing with in terms of grief and forgiveness and faith. It takes a little bit away from that. Let's move on. The very first episode, I found it very slow, and this is actually why it took me so long to watch it. I kind of wanted to watch it with my wife, but there wasn't really a good time for us, so she finally gave me the go-ahead to watch it on my own. Once the reveal happened in the 3rd episode, I understood exactly your feeling for the last. I was texting you nonstop. I was like, oh my God. And I was like, no wonder you were like busting and telling me to like watch it right away.
Yeah.
Like, of course you were. You knew I was going to be like all about this. It's
Yeah.
about religion, especially Catholicism and vampires and all of this stuff. So it just hit so many boxes for me. My very first theory, the strongest one I had multiple, but the strongest theory I had was based on Riley's dream, where he's sitting in the boat. They don't explain it. He just goes to sleep in one scene, and then he's in the boat, and then he kind of wakes up. And it was based on that scene. The story, or the show, starts with Riley involved in a car accident. He was a drunk driver, and he kills a young girl. He gets into a car crash. He's almost totally fine. He just has a few scratches, but he's totally killed this girl. And then he's haunted by it. He goes to jail. He has this dream where he's in the boat. The way that the dream was shown, the way that he kept seeing the dead girl, how he had to come back to his home community that he never wanted to come back to. The fact that his home community was so awkward and broken down and disheveled. And especially at the end of the first episode, where he sees that exact same boat beached on the shore, I thought he was in purgatory. I actually thought Riley had died and he was in purgatory. He had to go through something to cleanse himself of the sin that he committed, to cleanse himself of the grief that he had over what he had done before he could move on.
Right.
So I thought he had died, and the whole thing was just purgatory. It was all made up.
So there's a very strong part on the, I believe it's the first or the second episode, I don't recall, but it's during one of those dream sequences that he has where he is in the boat. So there's a scene where he sees the dead girl, which is usually the precursor to when he finally starts to fall asleep, and then he goes into that dream. So he sees the dead girl, then he goes into the dream, but while he's on the boat, there's an interlace scene of the church on the last episode where all the blood is splattered on the walls.
Right.
And so that's one of the things that when I rewatched the show, I noticed that, and I was like, why is Riley seeing the future at that point? Because he's having these dreams about the ocean and all of that. But then all of a sudden this new scene comes in where the church is all bloody and like it's, the doors are open. So does that mean that he is in fact not dreaming, but just like in a state of limbo, seeing what's going to happen? So that didn't actually come to my mind until you mentioned that. And then I remembered that I saw that scene and I was wondering why. So it's entirely possible that that is part of what's happening. Obviously, as the show progresses, you really kind of notice that that's not necessarily the case. And in fact, you have that theory, but I had an incredibly strong feeling, I guess you can say, from the first episode, because again, you and I are so into the vampire lore that when the priest first arrives at the island, he actually carries with him a treasure chest or a chest, right? Like a giant chest.
Yeah, huge like old style,
like a Victorian, very old looking
huge treasure chest.
Yeah, exactly.
Or travel chest. Yeah.
And so the explanation is that he was bringing back to the island a lot of relics and things that he'd found during his travels, etc. So that was his excuse to get that chest through customs back into the island. And so anyway, when he drags that in, he puts it down, and then all of a sudden he taps on it twice, right? And then like seconds later, something taps from the inside back at him. And I was just sitting there
completely missed this.
So yeah. I was sitting there going like, what could possibly be in that is knocking back? And so one of the things that jumped into my mind immediately when I saw that box was that scene in Bram Stoker's Dracula where Vlad is actually traveling from the old world to the new world. And he is in that box. Remember, like he's like interred in this almost like coffin full of earth and dirt. And he comes out every night to feed on the sailors. So the scene of the box itself and the earth, that's what basically tipped it off for me. Now, I didn't have confirmation of that until obviously like by the second episode, I was starting to feel a little bit stronger than that, because on the second episode, you kind of realize that there is a change happening with the community itself. And the only thing that could possibly be is the mass sessions that they go into and what happens in those sessions. So anyway, I had a very strong feeling. I didn't have confirmation, but the moment that I found out what it was, I basically yelled it at the TV and I was like, aha, I knew it was a fucking vampire. So, yeah, I kind of caught onto that really quickly, but it was never like a for sure thing until they confirm it.
Yeah, I completely just, I don't know if I didn't hear it or I wasn't paying attention or what, but I completely spaced on that. And of course, I've seen that movie. It's awful. Everybody just read the book. Dracula, it's much better. But of course, I read the book. And yeah, one of the first things that Dracula does, but actually before he goes, he invites one of the main characters, Jonathan Harker, to come to the castle because he wants to buy property in England. And while Jonathan's in the castle, before things get crazy, he notices that like local gypsies are hired by Vlad to come. And during the day, they're just digging. And then later on, he goes and he goes, as he kind of starts realizing that he's dying and that Vlad is going to kill him, he goes searching in the day while Vlad is asleep. And he goes down into this area where the gypsies were digging, and he just sees case and case and case of dirt. And that's what Vlad does. He has to travel in one, and he sends like, I don't know if it's hundreds, but he sends many cases of dirt. And he disperses them. He sends them to different locations in England so that he can travel across England. And he always has a place to rest.
Right.
He always has a place to hide during the day. The other thing is in the lore of Dracula, is that a vampire always has to be near or has to rest with the dirt where he was, I guess, unbaptized to become a vampire.
Right.
Like unconsecrated ground, the unconsecrated ground of the vampire's birth. So he needs that. And so actually in Dracula, they go around destroying those. They go spoiling them with like holy water and stuff. So I completely spaced on that. For me, when I started to get suspicious, I still didn't think vampire, but I started to get suspicious in the second episode, the Riley's mother cuts her finger. I don't know if it's a paper cut or what, but she cuts her finger while she's reading.
She's
and
sewing.
She looks at it. Sewing, that's right. And she pricks her finger. And she looks at it, but it's really blurry. And she's wearing her glasses. And she's like, why is it blurry? And then she takes them off, and then it's clear. And then immediately I piece together the scene with the priest giving communion to the old lady with Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. I can't remember her name. The doctor's mother with Alzheimer's. And I immediately pieced it together in the very first episode before the priest's reveal. The altar boys are in, and they look at they look for the vessel of wine, because they're like, oh, we have to fill the vessel. And they look, and they're like, oh, it's already full. Mm-hmm. And I immediately connected it. I said, okay, yep, it's something is being put in the wine. And I assumed it was blood because it would like look the same and mix. Mm-hmm. And also it's Catholic, and that's the blood of Christ.
It's literally the representation of
once it's transfigured, right? Yeah. So I immediately put that together, and I very quickly, my theory was that this new priest was not a new priest, but he was the old priest, younger. Mm-hmm. But I still didn't connect it with like any vampire stuff. So the vampire reveal was very surprising to me.
Yeah.
But then it all made sense. Everything made sense based on those connections that I had made. And I found, like you said, like I found it very satisfying. I thought the way it happened too, in episode 3 is when this is revealed at the very end. But at the beginning, the priest walks into an empty church. Great scene. He's getting the church ready. He walks into an empty church, and it plays with time a little bit, because I think it's before his first reveal to the community.
Yep, it is.
And he goes in to pray and confess, mm-hmm. but of course he confesses to no one but God. And he confesses that he's going to have to lie to everyone, and he tells the story of Father Pruitt. And if you're not keyed in, maybe you just think like, oh, like obviously the old father died.
He knew him, yeah.
And he has to lie to the congregation. But the fact that he wandered away with Alzheimer's, he wandered away from the group. He found himself in the desert. He stumbled in a sandstorm into some ruins that were excavated because of the sandstorm. And then at the very end of the episode is when he's attacked, and just the setup for it is great. It's very monster movie, but it's a great setup. And I really like, of course he comes back and he's Father Paul. I think he's John, actually like John Pruitt, but he's Father Paul when he comes back. And he chose that name very deliberately for anyone who knows the Bible very well. Paul Saul. So Saul was a Jewish person who persecuted Christians. He like went hunting for them and would like, reveal them to the authorities and stuff very vehemently. Like he hated Christians. And then when he was wandering in the desert, he was traveling through the desert, God blinded him. And when God lifted the scales from his eyes, I think is the wording, he was Christian. He believed in God. He believed in Jesus. He wanted to preach the message. And then he renamed himself because he was reborn. And that's what Catholics do. When you're baptized, you choose a saint's name. You're reborn, so you choose a new name. And he was reborn as Paul.
Right. So
the John Paul thing. So John, of course, is also a religious name. But the Paul thing, now that I think about it, John is the author of Revelations at the end. So so the naming is very important. Well, not very important, but
it's
like a fun connection to make. Yeah. It's not just random. Right? John brings revelation to this community by changing into Paul,
right.
Essentially, right? By having this greater truth revealed to him. Mm-hmm. Of course, he sees the vampire. The vampire sucks his blood, and when he's dying, he looks up and he sees a halo around his head.
Right.
Of course, he's dying, so he's going to see this. And the vampire has wings. He's like naked and horrific, and he has wings. And again, if anyone knows the Bible very well, angels are a very scary thing. If you actually look up like seraphim and stuff like that, they look very weird. If you read in the Bible, he talks about this in the show a lot when he kind of reveals the vampire to the community. But he talks about how angels are very scary. And of course they would be.
And about the fear that you feel when you're in the presence of an angel itself, because that's the biggest driver for why the turning of the community was so successful, because he used that fear to justify almost that it was the right thing to do. it made sense. Every piece was falling into place, including the fact that everybody was terrified, right?
Exactly. He had those biblical justifications, and he uses, like Mary was terrified when Gabriel revealed himself to her to deliver good news. And anytime an angel is mentioned in the Bible, everyone is afraid of the angel. And so the horrific visage of the angel, like you said, worked to his favor, and he had the scripture to back it up. And so this community that became very devout, and they became very devout. Of course you would, when a girl in a wheelchair stands and all of these miracles are happening in your community, you're going to be very devout. And then you see this living proof and you're terrified and you're in the moment, and this person that you trust is telling you to like trust him and just do what he says. And they basically do a mass cult-like suicide with rat poison. And when you see the first person drink the rat poison, die, and then come back, obviously this is all very compelling. It would take a very, very rational person in this circumstance to question and deny what they're seeing. I'm going to bring up the major plot issue I thought, and I only thought about this after the fact.
Okay.
This is often a plot issue in zombie movies and stuff too. In this universe, do vampires just not exist? You have this creature that looks like a vampire, drinks blood like a vampire, cuts his wrist to give blood to the priest. Do vampires just like, has the priest just never read Dracula or like heard of a vampire or anything like that? Like, how does no one in this community just be like, this is a fucking vampire, guys? Like,
okay,
this is not an angel.
Okay, so two things. If this is what we were talking about before, so I think I can at the very least lend some credibility to it. And so this is my point of view on the whole vampire thing. So the Father Pruitt, when he goes into the cave and he first gets attacked, right? He gets turned. So the fact that the reason why he wanders off into the storm is because he's got dementia. He doesn't know what he is doing. He is now at this point completely disconnected from reality, let alone knowing about vampires. He doesn't even know what his name is anymore. So he just wanders off, goes into the cave, finds it by pure accident, random act, goes into the cave and gets attacked. And in his dementia, the one thing that is a constant is his religion, because that is who he is, that's his identity. So the way for him to justify the horrific things that he was going under once he's being attacked, obviously the first thing that's going to come to his mind as a coping mechanism is an angel, because again he believes that this is true. He knows that angels exist. He wants it to be true. So in his mind, with his dementia and the level of problems that he had at that point, plus being scared, then at one point he says, when he's getting turned, he says he felt the fear, the everything negative, he felt it being sucked away as the vampire was feeding on him. Now he said, as the angel transformed me, he says. But he does, I think once the vampire attacks him, true to lore, the vampire actually managed to exert a certain level of control on him telepathically, right? So that, combined with the fact that the priest really wanted to believe that it was an angel, kind of does give credence to the fact that he just did not think it was a vampire because of the state of mind that he was in. Now, that I think I can make that argument for the priest. What I can't make the argument for is the mass suicide that happens on the last episode, because even you say that it would take someone, I mean, after witnessing, quote unquote, witnessing miracle after miracle after miracle, first the girl that starts walking, then the priest comes back to life, but not the entire community did not witness that. It was only a few select people that witnessed those miracles consecutively, namely the mayor, the wife, the mayor's wife, and the Sturge, who were like key players in how everything plays out at the end. But it's only a handful of people that actually have seen these miracles that all band together to bring to fruition the priest's plan. So I don't understand why is it that when everyone in the church starts to see someone die, they automatically think, when that person comes back, they automatically think, oh, it's legit. Like, I would have an enormous amount of skepticism. Even if I was a religious person, I would have an enormous amount of skepticism if I saw someone drinking quote unquote the Kool-Aid, because that's exactly what that scene reminded me of, right?
Jim Jones.
Yeah. So someone drinks the Kool-Aid and they die, and all of a sudden, well, what makes you, if when they come back, what makes me think that they didn't just fake it? Like, why?
That's a very good point.
So that
very convincing fake, but that's a good point.
Absolutely. Yeah. So at the very end, I had more issues with what happens at the end than them not thinking that it was a vampire. I can definitely see how a veil is put over the entire island's eyes, and it's so calculated because of these few people working through the plan that the priest had. I can understand why nobody thought vampire at the beginning. I can understand why the priest didn't think vampire at the beginning, because he just didn't want to. He wanted to believe.
Right. I do think that is a compelling argument, and you're right. Like, no one's seen like the vampire feed,
right,
or, like, do its thing, so like no one's there. But another thing you said, like, for everybody being convinced in the community, they don't necessarily see, like, the church isn't full when the girl in the wheelchair stands.
No, it's only a few people. Yeah.
Right. But then it's implied, there's like a montage that implies that, like, over the next few days, over the next few weeks, many more people start to come, which means many more people start to take communion. And suddenly all of those people taking communion, drinking the wine and eating the body, their woes start to evaporate, and they start to look younger, and they start to feel better. Mm-hmm. I also wonder, you said, so not only did the priest want to believe, but he was fed on, he was given blood. And so, as we know from vampire lore, the sire of a vampire has a lot of control over the vampire.
Absolutely.
Like a parent-child relationship, but stronger, because there's like a telepathic connection.
There's a bond.
And the vampire never speaks. Vampire never ever he doesn't say one word in the show. He just like a cat, and he never speaks. Yet we know he's communicating with Pruitt.
Correct.
Telepathically, and he's telling him certain things. And obviously, he communicated this plan to take him to. So I wonder, because everybody was taking part in communion, everyone had a good dose of it in them, with the exception of a lot of the people that ended up fighting against them, namely the doctor, Erin. She had the blood, but she also had the horrific revelation of Riley dying in front of her, mm-hmm. and the sheriff, who obviously never took communion. So the people who didn't take communion, and the older lady, who is now a young lady, they had kind of the truth revealed to them in some sort of horrific way. And so the trust that they would have had with that character, plus the lack of control that the blood of the vampire would have had, their sire would have had, I think that kind of like pushed everyone along.
It could have pushed them. Plus,
but also,
yeah, go ahead.
Also, you do have cults where it's like, obviously Jim Jones didn't work any miracles, but he convinced tons of people to kill themselves, right?
And that's exactly the point I was going to make just now. We were both saying how good of a character the priest is. And one of the reasons he's so good is because the amount of charisma he's got when he's delivering sermons, when he's engaging mm-hmm. with the community, when he is talking to other people about, during the AA meetings, for example, the level of communication skills that he's got is so effective. You automatically cannot help but like him, love him really, right, as a person, because he is the kind of person that just immediately, the moment you take a look at him, the first thing that comes to your mind is, this guy wants to help, right? So
right.
Absolutely, I can definitely agree with that. I think it is possible that he would have, that the brainwashing at the end was likely, if not very likely. I had trouble believing it from my own side, just because of my own skepticism. And I did reflect a lot of my own beliefs. This is another thing that I think the show did phenomenally well, is that I am a hardcore atheist by nature, but I come from a Catholic background. And watching the show, watching very the masses. Background. Yeah, exactly. Oh, Mexico, right? So watching the show, hearing the sermons, watching him interact with the community, he is what I would have considered, like in Mexico at least. I know it's probably likewise everywhere else, but in Mexico at least, he's what I would have considered an actual priest that I would have listened to and talked to when I went to church. So even though I was skeptical, maybe for myself, I would have been like, nah, bro, like, hold on a second, I ain't drinking nothing. But other people, having that level of charisma affects other people. And like you said, there's other cult leaders that have pulled that off successfully. So yeah, I can suspend disbelief with that explanation. Absolutely.
Sure. I think everything we talked about is fair. Also, in vampire lore, the vampires have the ability to like glamour people, to mesmerize
That is true.
people.
Yeah.
So maybe even though he was like a very young vampire, maybe that is also a little bit of it. Like he is glamoring.
There's an effect
people,
of it.
essentially.
Yeah.
And I wonder. I'd have to go back and watch, but I wonder if they hint a little bit about that. I wonder, like, do his eyes ever glow when he's like giving the final speech?
No.
You know what I mean? Like everyone in the so then there's no giveaway there. But
oh, you mean like after he's turned?
Yeah, so after he's turned and he's giving that final sermon, is at any point when he's really fiery, do his eyes do that little glow thing?
That's funny.
It mostly happens in the dark. I think it's just kind of like an effect in like that happens in the dark.
Actually,
that says they can see in the dark, but
no, they do have a reasoning for it, but it's not explicit. It's the hunger. It's the representation of the hunger. When they get really hungry and like when they're first born.
Like an addict's eyes.
Exactly.
When they're like seeing,
Yeah. When they get really hungry, the eyes turn to that way. So that's a way of like, it's almost like a warning. It's a warning sign for other people. Well, for the viewer, really.
Right. Like a wolf growling or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, or like if you've ever seen like an addict in the depths in the midst of their addiction. Yeah. That's pretty good. But anyway, whatever the reason, obviously he is really compelling. And I'd actually say that maybe your cultural background, or at least people who are still practicing Catholic from Mexico, probably this a little bit would be a little less shocking, because Mexican Catholicism is way more like hardcore on the death and the suffering, and that aspect of it, where like North American Catholicism has really been Protestantized into the like Jesus loves you, peace and harmony,
we have
kind of thing, and the suffering has been taken out of it. Like you have like the Saint of Death, right? And we don't have that.
Yeah, no, our version of it is a lot more hardcore.
Yeah, right. Like it's really about like the blood and the suffering, and you have parts of the world, like in Brazil, they actually crucify a guy like every year in a religious festival.
Oh yeah.
They actually, like, someone volunteers to be actually crucified the same way Jesus was. Obviously not to death, but they have I think they don't hammer it in the hands. I think they hammer it in the wrist in a certain way so that they're not permanently like crippled from it. But
yeah.
Anyway, it's very good. It is very, very, very good justifications for it.
All right, so really quickly before we move on to the next one, so the angel or demon, vampire?
Demon, 100%. And you know why
Okay, go.
I'll tell you why. Because at the ending, we're kind of jumping around here, but at the very end, the vampire is feeding on Erin. Erin is the last one standing. She's the last person standing. The vampire is feeding on her. There's a really great connection to a story she tells Riley when she's younger about how her mother made her, when she was very young, clip a dove's wings. Yeah, she loved to collect doves or something, and they would clip the wings. And she thought that was so cruel, so she let it go. And then, of course, the dove is a symbol of peace and things like that. When she is being fed on by the vampire, her last act of defiance and fight is to clip his wings. Mm-hmm. She takes a knife that she has, and she starts stabbing at his wing, cutting big holes in it so he can't fly away, because she needs to kill this thing, can't let it get away. So she's cutting holes, and he notices it a little bit, and he starts to look, but then she brings him back down because he's so focused entirely on his desire. And so actually, I think it is a great metaphor for the futility of power. The whole show, up until that last episode, he is seen as this like very powerful character. Mm-hmm. He can do anything he wants. He's going to turn this whole island. He's feeding on whoever he wants to feed on. He is king of this island. He is so powerful. But actually, there's two instances of this. The two kids who run away, they go into the house where he was hiding, the abandoned house where he was hiding this whole time. And they see the corpse of the first like drug dealer that he eats. And then he's currently feeding on someone. They shoot him.
And he doesn't
do anything.
Yeah.
They shoot him a second time, and he's just like, get away. I'm busy. And he just keeps eating.
They douse him.
They douse him in gasoline. He doesn't move. He is completely trapped by his hunger, his desire. So actually, as powerful as he is just a base creature that's driven by hunger. So if he was to be an actual, and for me, that says more demon, or just like, I wouldn't even go that far. I would just say like an animal, like a vampire. Like he is just a creature of this world. An angel would be able to control itself. An angel is a powerful being. And for me, the ending of this creature, he's so focused on his hunger that he couldn't even, and it would have been so easy for him to prevent. He just have to like put his wings away. He doesn't even have to stop feeding, just puts his wings away. But he's so compelled to eat. He's so compelled by this base desire that he can't.
Okay.
And so it doesn't matter how powerful he is. It doesn't matter that he can fly. It doesn't matter that he like can't really be killed other than sunlight. Because in this world, it kind of seems like you can't kill a vampire. Like a stake to a heart isn't working. Like shooting them in the heart isn't working. Like I don't know what you could do to kill a vampire.
Yeah,
it's not easy to do.
He's got regen. He's got a lot of powers that regular vampires do.
Yeah,
but not a lot of the weaknesses.
Yeah, exactly. So he seems invincible. But yeah, his doom is just that he's feeding, and he doesn't care that his wings are being clipped.
Interesting.
It's not until he senses the light, which is another base desire, another animal instinct, like suddenly, oh, there's danger. There's like danger to my life now. So he can't even put the pieces of the puzzle together that what she's doing is a danger to his life. He can't put the pieces together that he has nowhere to hide on this island anymore, and that he should have been gone a long time ago to make sure that he found a cave or something to hide in. So he's just like a weak base creature. So that says to me that he's not an angel, and really, I guess you can make the argument that he's a demon, because demons, opposite angels, they're angels that have fallen, right? They're angels that can't control or don't want to control these things. They want to be base creatures. So that to me says that it's not an angel.
Interesting.
That's my argument.
Okay. I actually hadn't thought that deeply into it. I wanted to, I think I was pretty much on the priest side, where I wanted to believe that it was an actual angel that just became corrupt at one point and was cast down to earth and got stuck in earth, and, you know, living in a cave for God knows, you know, how long, like millennia. And then all of a sudden it just comes back to life. And that's why he's so hungry. He's so bent on feeding. But I still think that's a good explanation for it. I don't think either one of us is wrong, really. I think it can be both. It's left. I don't even think it's explored deeply in the lore of the show itself as to what it is. We just know that he's there. He is called a quote unquote angel, and that's it. So I could probably do another full episode on that creature itself, just because he's so interesting. But
nothing is done about him.
But nothing is done. No. Yeah. It's like he's one of the most interesting pieces of the show, and he's almost underutilized on purpose, just because they didn't want to steal from the main focus of the show itself, which is not the vampire story. Like I said, to me at least, it's not the vampire story. It's the love story behind it. So yeah, all right. Cool.
I would also say, just like from a biblical perspective and from like a theological perspective, that angels and demons are more ethereal, and the whole reason a demon possesses someone is because it wants the sensations denied it by its essence, its ethereal essence. Mm-hmm. As an ethereal essence, like, you can't eat, you can't have the pleasures of eating and drinking and sex and all of this kind of stuff, right? And touch, that is something, we're mortal and we suffer, but that is kind of like, you know, God gave us a bone. He's like, okay, you're not great, but I'll give you this. Yeah. Meanwhile, the angels and the ones that became demons later, it's like, well, you're very, very powerful, and you can present. That's the other thing in theology, is that angels present themselves to you in the way that you need to see them when you need to see them. Mm-hmm. So, and like in modern theology, that is like, that might be a homeless person. That might be this, that might be that might be, you know, a dream that you have. Well, how, like, the angel is powerful enough to know, like, what will resonate with this person.
Got it.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think the physicality of it is also another good argument against it being an angel and more like a creature of this world than anything else.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I got it. I agree with that. That I think you swayed me enough on that argument.
We did it.
I would agree.
We did it, everybody. Or is it just my powerful vampire glamour ability, my charisma?
I don't think that works through Discord.
I'm just kidding. I like absolutely could not be a vampire. It's so gross. They're so gross. They're so gross.
You're
If
saying
I woke
if
up
one came to you
like,
and turned you, you wouldn't like. You would ask him to kill you.
I'd kill myself.
Because there's that point, right? Like there's a point where like they can either let you bleed to death and not turn you, or they can turn you.
I'd want it to turn me so I could try and kill it.
Interesting. But then what would you do?
I would sun myself.
Wrong. You would go hunting for the other vampires and kill them. And not until you've annihilated every single one of them can you rest.
So I make sure. That's good. That's the sequel.
See, the wrong people get turned.
Midnight Mass. The Massier.
They're remassing.
11 a.m. Mass. The sequel.
All day mass.
Regular ass mass. Yeah.
All right. What's next? I mean, we had a shit ton of stuff to talk about still. We kind of jumped back and forth.
I think we got through the theories.
We covered enough of the theories, I think.
Let's talk about some of the characters. So we already talked a lot about Paul Pruitt. John, whatever you want to call him. John Paul Pruitt. We talked a lot about him. Phenomenal actor. As a Catholic, from like a North American perspective, the sense of like deja vu, or not nostalgia, but like just the sense of being, the way he talked, the way he stood, his physicality,
his mannerisms
was so unreal perfect for a priest. Unreal. Like it weirds me out how priest-like he was. He perfects, and you know, I've met lots of lovely priests in my time, but there is very often an awkwardness to them. And I think maybe that's, you know, the kind of person who becomes a priest. I think that's also the kind of lifestyle that they live, which is very solitary. In a way, like other than mass and other than like maybe some of their charitable work, like they are very solitary. They talk and live with other priests. Mm-hmm. So there's just a way about a lot of them, and a lot of them here are not charismatic, right? He ends up being more charismatic as time goes on, as his mission continues, but he has this very, very awkward presence at the beginning. And then also the way that he carries mass, and like the way that the songs are sung, the hymns are sung at the beginning. The first one, I can't remember the name of it now, but the very first one, oh man, I actually felt like I was in mass. I cannot get over like just how good he was. My one problem with him is at the end, and maybe this can be explained by like the vampire got what he wants, so he wasn't exerting as much power, or he was too busy feeding, so he didn't care. But he does like a 180 on his plan. Like his plan goes, and then he's immediately like, ooh, I'm the baddie. and it's like, what? Like, you were so keen on this, and now all of a sudden. And then the other thing too is that, and I think this again is an argument that goes against it being an angel. When he's talking, the priest had an affair with the old lady. The doctor is his daughter, just the high level. He's talking to the woman that he loves, the woman that he had an affair with, and he says to her, he's like, the reason I brought that thing here was really for you. Mm-hmm. And so then it's like, did the vampire stop exerting power over him? Or did he really not believe it this whole time? Did he really just like think this was a miracle and this was his second chance at like living a life with this woman?
No.
That he wanted to live. His great regret.
I think the reason why he changes his mind, albeit really late, but the reason why he changes his mind is because he saw what happened to his daughter. His daughter dies in front of him.
But it's before she gets shot, because she gets shot like right at the end. Because even then, the two camps are kind of separating. Some of the vampires save some of the people that haven't been going to church, and the priest, when Bev comes back, she's like, "Hey, I burned everything down. We did this. We killed everybody. This is the faithful, and let's get going." And this is before his daughter dies. She's like off, whatever, getting ready to burn the church. And he says, like, no, I was wrong. We're a pack of wolves. We're not sheep among them. We are the wolves. So this is before his daughter dies. He starts to have regrets.
I think it has also a lot to do with the way that Bev. So at the end, there's the whole goal of turning everyone in a quote unquote controlled environment was because the priest thought that he could walk him through the hunger and talk him through the hunger until nobody was so phased and like frenzied that they would be able to listen and reason, and then they would figure out a way of what to do and how to acquire blood, etc. So I think the priest thought he had under control, but the thing that he did not foresaw was Bev going against that plan because he thought she was under his influence enough, under his control enough that she would go with whatever he would say, and up to the point where he gets shot in church. Up until that point, I think she was, but it's almost like, I mean, the religious themes are it's so funny how they fit so well. The one thing that brought the priest down was not the bullet, it was pride. Pride comes before the fall.
7 sins.
Yeah. Which is funny because there's a poster of 7 above Riley's bed.
Above Riley when he sleeps.
Anyway, so that's another thing. But anyway, so the priest's fall really is pride. It's because of pride that he ultimately his plan fails, and that's what Bev takes over. That, to me, that's a pivotal moment when he finally understands that what he is doing and like the scope of what he's done. That's the moment when the dime lands while he's like, trying to recover from the gunshot. And then he comes back and then he starts to see everything that's happening, and he still kind of try to salvage things, but it's impossible because of what happens after. So
yeah, I think also maybe when he comes back, I wish I could remember her name, the old Mrs. Mrs. I can't remember her name. Well, Julie?
I know. Maria, maybe? No, hold on. Listen, we're horrible with names. This entire show, by the way, we're being like the old man, the priest, the guy, the girl, the old lady. We like, it's almost like we don't know the show, but fuck, man, like we know the show so well. It's just like, it's not easy to remember the names. They're so inconsequential. Mildred. Yeah, Mildred. That's what it was. Yeah.
Mildred. Shout out to IMDb. But yeah, I know I'm awful with names. I'm like, oh, the guy with the beard. That guy. I didn't even know Riley for the longest time. Oh my god.
Oh no, Riley stood in my mind.
The main character. Yeah. But so Mildred, she's waiting for him. She shoots him in the head, and then the vampire comes and kills her. But then she wakes up, and she comes back, and she waits for him to wake up, and she's the only one in the church. And then they talk, and he's telling her all this stuff, and she's just like, no, you did a bad thing. I love what we had. I love you. I have regrets, but that's life. Life is regrets, and we're supposed to get old, and we're supposed to die, and that's the way. And so I think maybe like when his grand romantic plan, I texted as soon as I saw that and that episode ended, I kind of messaged you, and I just said it was an evil he called love.
Yeah,
he did this great evil, thinking the whole time that it was this grand romantic loving gesture. He can finally have the life. They can have an eternity together with their daughter, that was robbed from them, a life that was robbed from them because of their positions and social pressure and whatever else.
But here's the funny part. As a lover, I don't understand it. I wouldn't do it. As a father, I would 1000% do that. 1000%. To be able to spend eternity with my kids, everyone feeding off of the more common people. Absolutely.
The herd. Yeah.
Anyway, Father,
I'd have to kill you. I'd be sad, but I'd have to kill you.
Father Pruitt, Paul, John, whatever. He's just like
fantastic character.
I mean, top character.
One of the best I've seen in TV.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Years.
From the acting to the character itself, everything about that character is just so good, so powerful. It resonates so well. It's like one of the reasons why I absolutely love the show. if this guy existed in real life, I would still be Catholic.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You did say that. Yeah. Yeah. That's funny. And, I would probably be a more active one until, again, like episode 3 or 4, when he starts to get like militant about it. And then I don't like that. Like the whole, like, this soul is mine, like the Rifleman's Creed or whatever.
Yeah.
He lost me. I'm like, sir, you're too American. I can't. What about Riley? What did you think of Riley? Riley's kind of the other main character.
Riley, it's funny because I see your description on his name, bit douchey. I'm an atheist because I'm so smart and jaded, and I gotta tell you, I agree with you, but I found myself empathizing with Riley. Mm-hmm. I love the priest, but I found myself in the shoes of Riley constantly. From the moment when he spoke about AA, for example, because when he goes to the first AA meeting, he's telling the priest, well, you know how this rec center came to be. It was through corruption. Bev stole money from people, and then she used that money and like whatever. And the church builds, that's why every like dilapidated village always has a very shiny church, is because the church takes advantage of all of the population, of their people. And so anyway, he's got a huge problem with religion, which I think it's a true problem. I think it's an actual problem that religion takes advantage of the most in need, with the promise of giving them something ethereal that they can't benefit from, even though they think they do. So that's like when he started talking about that, I was with Riley. Is he douchey because he thinks he's better? Absolutely. That's part of his character, actually. That's why the dad, when the dad is making amends with him and he's explaining to him why he's so upset with him, it's not just because Riley went out and he killed someone. That's part of it. But he says, like, from the moment when you started building your startups and stuff like that, like you always treated me like I was an idiot because I didn't know much about technology. I think that's just his character. That's who Riley is. Right. But once he has that conversion, when AA starts to work its magic on him, he's still douchey, but I think he's douchey with a purpose. And that's the thing about his character, is that if he had lasted, spoiler alert, he dies in episode 4. But the way that he goes, if they had kept him alive until the end of the series, I would not have liked him. But what he did, the ultimate sacrifice that he makes, right, is really, to me, what made him my number 2 in the show, like number 2 character in the show.
I agree.
Because he, as opposed to the priest, actually makes a sacrifice of love, which ultimately actually sets him free. So Riley, the story of Riley goes, he kills someone, so he goes to jail. Because he comes from a very religious background with his parents, when he goes back home, his parents, his dad is very resentful of him. His mom is very protective of him. The dad actually warns him and says, when you go to church, and you will go to church, because at first he was thinking that he wasn't going back. So when he talks to Riley, he says, you will sit down during communion. So when you think about it, it's the fact that he killed the girl that starts his redemption immediately, because he can't take communion, which means he cannot drink the blood, which means he cannot be turned immediately. And the way in which he is turned is by force, right? The vampire finds him and attacks him in episode 4. And essentially, once he's turned, he starts to understand the things that are happening. And he clues into the fact that it's not an angel. It's an actual vampire. He's the only one that seems to realize the hunger that they feel is not something that's going to be easily controlled. And very soon there's going to be tens of them, if not, people, tens of vampires that are going to be like roaming around the streets. Hundreds, I guess, because they do say that the population is in the hundreds. So anyway, he makes a sacrifice by telling Aaron the story of what happened to him, and he makes it so well planned. He gets in the boat, he goes to talk to, after he gets turned, after the hunger has passed enough that he can be in control, he gets on his boat, and then he asks Aaron if she wants to go for a ride. Aaron is very mad at him because they were supposed to meet the night before to finally kind of like consummate their relationship, and he ditches her in favor of going to talk to the priest because he catches him in a lie, which is then how the vampire finds him, turns him. And so anyway, he goes back to Aaron after he is turned, and he says, can we go for a boat ride and I'll explain everything. They get on the boat. The moment he gets on the boat, I knew he wasn't coming back. I just knew it.
Yeah, me too.
Because in his dream, when he's explaining his dream in an earlier episode, he explains his dream to Aaron and he says, it's weird. I always have this dream of getting on a boat, but at the moment the sunrise comes, I can't see past that point. I see nothing. I'm not dreaming anymore. I'm blank. And so he gets in the boat. Of course, at that point, I'm like, oh my God. He's either going to turn her or he's going to die in front of her, right? So as we know, he explains everything that's happening on the island to her. And he knows that she's not going to believe him. He knows that it's such an outrageous story that the only way in which she could potentially believe him is if he had some sort of proof. And sure enough, by the time that he finished telling her the story, she is like, well, yeah, that's a very unbelievable story. Like, what makes you think that I'm going to believe you? And he's like, all you have to do is look at me, right? So sunrise comes and you don't see him light up. Actually, you see him still on the boat as the sun is up. Everything is fine. But the person in front of him is no longer Aaron. It is now the girl.
Sound goes away too.
Yeah, sound goes away. And the person in front of him at that point is the girl that he killed, except she does not appear to him the same way that she has appearing to him before, with cuts on her face and the glass. She is whole. She is healthy. She is beautiful in front of him, right? To me, that's it. That immediately signaled to me that Riley not only redeemed himself, but he was accepted into that heaven that he did not believe in. Mm-hmm. And he is now ascended to the kingdom of God. And he is forgiven and he is now happy and free. And then they do a hard cut to the guy on fire in front of Aaron, and Aaron
it's Aaron screaming at first. It goes from the silence in this nice moment, and then Aaron is screaming, like such a good scream too. Screaming, and then it cuts to like Riley as his
on
like
fire.
whole body is like burning away. And I love that it went to credits and she's still screaming. It doesn't go away.
Yeah.
Like the credits is just her screaming.
So
for like the whole thing.
If nothing else, for that specific moment and how he handled that situation to make her believe what he was saying and to save her life, really. Ultimately, it doesn't happen. But so for that simple reason, I think I like that made him a favorite of mine. That really redeemed him in my eyes.
Yeah, me too. The thing that I really didn't like is when the miracle happens, and the girl, the first obvious one, and the girl stands up out of the wheelchair and her legs are fine and everything like that. Actually, there was two things. There's one when he's first talking to Aaron, he's first back on the island, he's talking about like, I read everything. I read the Quran, I read the Torah, I read this, I read that, couldn't find God anywhere. And then when he's talking to the priest in AA about the miracle, and he's like, I can understand, misdiagnosis. It happens. It's rare, but it happens. Like, is it fucking rare? Is it? You finance douche? You fucking got your MD in prison?
Salary man.
Fucking idiot. It's rare, but it happens. But then he goes on to say, but I don't know how you knew. Because it would be disastrous if you got her to try to get her to stand up and she didn't stand up. Like, how did you know this was going to happen? And I think he's kind of gracious in the answer to the priest. And the priest gives a perfect answer. He's like, I wish I could tell you something that you'd believe. And I also love that the priest made fun of him. He's like, but nothing's going to be good enough for Riley. So I love that.
Even Riley is really like, good. Yeah, that's right. But he says it embarrassed. Like, he's like, yeah, that was such a good conversation.
Kind of once his eyes are opened, obviously his world is rocked when he is brought back from death to be a vampire. His sacrifice at the end, and it's so good too because he wanted that. When he talks about death, he has this huge soliloquy with Aaron, and he talks about death and how what his version of death actually it spends too much time on the science, and I found that really boring and again douchey. Because it's like, I read up on what happens when you die and your neurons keep firing for blah, blah, blah. But it was fine. It was kind of interesting because I didn't know. But it was just a little douchey. But then he actually starts to say something interesting. And he actually said a lot of stuff that I agree with about his atoms and his body going to like feed other things. And how in his death, he will be useful and give life in a way that he he didn't with his actual.
I mean, he took life.
Living
yeah,
life.
Yeah, exactly. He took away.
Yeah,
but...
he did the opposite. So by dying, he will do what he kind of thinks, I guess, humans should do, which is improve life and give life. Where his life was, you know, he very much talked about like, and the way he carried himself too. And I think this is like a great insight into depression and depressives. He felt like his life was wasted. Like he, not only was he not doing anything, but he was trying to dig himself out of a hole that he could never dig himself out of.
Right.
So I do think that whole death scene was great, and you're right, it totally redeems his character, and it's worth it. His awful douchiness is worth it because the arc is so successful. The actual growth that he goes through over 4 episodes is very impressive.
Yeah, it's a pronounced arc too. Like it's got such a high and such a low that is just the more effective for it. But interesting. Her rendition of what happens after death and his rendition of what happens after death, those are very, to me, that was the weakest part of the series. That scene when they're both talking to each other, and it's weird because it's
so long.
It's meant to be long. Yeah, but it's meant to be meaningful. It's meant to give comfort to both people who believe and people who don't believe. That's what that scene is meant to do for the watchers. It's supposed to unify both of those groups into a single cell that can then move forward with the story and suspend the disbelief, for things that are about to come. But I think the fact that they did it in monologues was very ineffective, because it's just like, there's just so much going on. Like as they're telling you this, you're almost kind of like countering their points in your mind. And that kind of distracted me. Like that's what I was doing with Aaron. I agree pretty much with everything that Riley said in that monologue. But as Aaron was talking, I just kept countering her points in my mind. So I just found myself kind of like having this debate almost. And I just didn't enjoy her explanation. And then I felt like I already knew what Riley was talking about, and I already agreed with that. So that whole section was a little bit, I think that was the lowest point of the show. But even then, it was still a fairly good scene, good. Right? That's saying something.
It's funny you say that about Aaron's, because actually, me, as someone who believes in an afterlife, my belief in an afterlife is actually a lot closer to Riley than it was Aaron. I had the same problem with Aaron. Actually, I kind of was like, Aaron, oh God, Aaron, you're a little bit dumb. I don't know, like this is awful.
Too gullible.
I had the same problem. Aaron's version of heaven is very much like, it's very for me, it's very Protestant, but it's very unthinking Christian. It's very much like God is an old dude with a beard. It's kind of like Santa Claus, but he wears a white robe instead of a red suit. When you die, you go to heaven, and it's like a giant party in the clouds, and you see all your family, and everything's chill. And it was very juvenile, and it makes sense to me because she had just suffered the loss of her child.
That's exactly right. She just
miscarried.
That's exactly right.
Or the vampire blood like ate the fetus, but she had just miscarried. So of course that's very comforting to her. Of course that's what she wants. She wants to meet the daughter or son that she never ever got to, that she never had.
Littlefoot.
So it's very, very comforting to her. So she I think for most viewers who are religious and who probably were scoffing at Riley's description of the afterlife, probably they were like, yeah, Aaron's nailed it. That's definitely what it's like. Yeah. Where like for me personally, I really resonated with like kind of the physics explanation of our atoms and our like what makes us is not our meat. Mm-hmm. To be honest, I'll be a little bit disappointed if like when I die and I go to the afterlife and I'm just still kind of me. Mm-hmm. That's like a little bit disappointing. But I also just think, I think if anyone has actually put in the work and read a lot of the theology and has read Augustine or Aquinas, you'll very quickly realize just how absurd that idea is. So Riley's was way closer to mine, where like I kind of believe godliness that moves through everything to allow it to exist. I imagine it, and I don't think this is what it looks like. It just helps me describe it. I imagine it as a river. Think of like the river Styx with all the spirits in it, right? All the souls in the underworld. I imagine that our spirit, what makes us and not our meat, kind of rejoins that Holy Spirit And that's what keeps existence going. That's what keeps life.
Right.
And that's what gives movement and heat to the universe. So I actually think Riley's thing is way more spiritual than probably a lot of people would give it credit for. And I really like it when you can match spirituality with like theoretical physics, really. Because I think theoretical physics is trying to, and math is the language of God, or like the blueprint of God, right? Like that, right? Like that is how. So actually, I think Riley's was again, it focuses a little too much on like the actual like, and then this happens, and then this happens. It's like, okay, Riley, like move it along.
Yeah,
like move it along. I get it. You're gonna rot, and your hair is gonna grow, and blah blah blah. Your fingernails are gonna be gnarly, but move it along. But Erin was kind of a non-character to me in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
she was very much she was a foil for Riley, and actually I think it's kind of weak because it's kind of just like it's a trope of like women redeem fallen men, right? Now I know they helped each other through grief, and that resonates a lot with me because one of the first conversations, actually like the first real conversation I ever had with Jen was about death. Like our very first night, we spent hours talking about the death of one of her good friends and the near death of my father and how that affected us. And so I actually there is power. There's a lot of power in that.
Absolutely.
And yeah. I think the love that they created in that moment is very powerful, but it is a little bit tropey. Like, his life wasn't worth living until the girl came along. Yeah. And fixed him, what did you think? Let's go to we'll just go to I think there's three main characters, really. There's Pruitt, there is Riley, and there's Bev. Yeah. Everyone else is a side piece.
Yeah, okay.
So, how'd you feel about Bev?
Now, I not since you ever watched The Mist?
Yeah.
Okay, so the Frank Darabont version, which is like the one that has like the really bleak ending. Spoiler alert, everyone dies, inclling
really bleak.
Yeah, except the dad who ends up killing everybody.
Not everyone dies. Right. That's what makes it so bleak.
Anyway, so in that's the only other reference that I can pinpoint to a quote unquote villain that was so disliked and believable at the same time. And oddly enough, both of the characters that I'm talking about actually are religious zealots almost, right? Yeah. So Bev Keane, I've never encountered someone in real life that was like that. I felt like
I have, not quite as bad, but I have.
Right. So I haven't, but I know that there are people that do have that level of religious mentality that can take things to that level, that they always see an act of God in everything that happens. So her character was a little bit over the top for me in how she ends up in the end. But here's the beauty of it. Her character was realistic up until the time when she literally becomes impossible to be, which is when she turns into a vampire. Then I think she loses some of her credibility as an actual religious person. But I also have to imagine, again, it's not like we could test that actually happened to someone, right? But when she becomes all powerful, when she becomes eternal in her eyes, she kind of loses herself to that power and becomes completely unhinged. It's one of the reasons why, to me, the ending was probably one of the weakest episodes, when they start, like, for example, burning down the village. I can't imagine that would be plausible, even if that same situation actually developed. Like, if a lady came to your house and said, "You are now immortal, I'm gonna burn your fucking house down," how would you react?
But no, my cool stuff is in here.
Exactly. These people's
my gaming PC.
These people's livelihoods were there. Like, it's not just because they turn into vampires all of a sudden it's like, oh, material shit doesn't matter. No. So her character. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think it's like the blood fervor that was going on. Like, it was a really it's like mob mentality, really crazy stuff. And then she does have, while I would argue she is lacking faith completely, her biblical knowledge, she saw the chaos, she saw everything, and she was able, and she actually connects a lot of the dots for the priest himself when he does some things. And he gives her credit for that. He's like, oh, Bev actually showed me this in the Bible, and it makes total sense. So for her, the Book of Revelation, it was happening. And for people who don't know, the Book of Revelation, or what do they call it? Apocalypse in some Bibles. Anyway, it's like the end times, right? And she very much thought this was the end times. They were going to leave this island the next day, and they were going to make the whole world godly vis-a-vis vampirism.
Right.
For me, I actually don't think it's that unrealistic, because for Bev, her religion is very performative. And this is like the crescendo of the performance. Yeah.
Under that umbrella, I guess I can definitely see that. I felt like she was a very, very powerful character in the show, because without her, without a Bev, the show just doesn't happen, right? It's like the priest cannot undergo all of the things
just as important as the vampire.
Exactly. And it's
fun again. Let's talk about monsters. The two monsters were necessary for the show to continue.
Absolutely. Including, I mean, she was definitely the other one. So I do have one thing that I want, before we continue with the character stuff. I just want to get this out of the way, because I am very confused about this. I don't understand. I think I have a theory as to why. So on episode 3, the priest is showing signs of something is wrong with him, right? Something is happening to him. He hasn't turned yet. He hasn't gone to the other side. He does not have the hunger, but you can tell that like he's passing out. He's throwing up blood. So now the show is already established that there's an avenue that people can take to kill things. So they have poison. That's how Joe's dog gets killed on episode 2. So during episode 3, you can see Bev moving one of those 1080 cans back into the storage unit in the school, but there's never reference to that scene again anywhere else, and you just kind of have to piece together what happens after. Bev seemingly has poisoned the priest, but I don't understand the why of that, because there's two things that can explain this, but neither one of them seems convincing to me. One, she really wanted to poison the priest, and she wanted to get rid of him and make him a martyr, all unbeknownst to the priest. Or two, the priest and Bev had an understanding from at the beginning of episode 3. Again, Bev kind of is looking at the picture in the priest's house of him as a younger version many years ago in front of the church when it was first established, right? She sees that picture, and then the scene cuts to something else. So she knows that there's something up with the priest, that it's not natural. She already knows this. And I think the priest basically forms this plan with Bev, which is why she's so integral to the plot. He forms this plan with her of undergoing his transformation to verify that he in fact will become eternal after he dies the first time. So that's one of those things where, like, I don't understand it. Were they in cahoots and they just the priest chose poison as the method of crossing the bridge, or was she trying to kill him, and then all of a sudden it just happens that the fucking
happy accident.
Like a happy accident, that he's just all of a sudden realizes like, holy shit, I am back, and had no indication as to what was going to happen. But again, it's kind of obnoxious that they don't tell you, like they don't really flesh that out. It could be either or, but there was no way that the priest would know. I don't think anyway. There's no way that he would know that he was going to come back. So it was a pretty big fucking gamble for him to do that in cahoots with Veb. So to me, it's almost more believable that Veb was trying to get rid of him, make him a martyr in front of the community, so to speak.
But then again, you like wonder why. It could be like because the priest was missing for so long, so she was the priest in lieu.
Yeah,
right.
Plus,
she was the one guiding mass.
Plus, she was super loyal to Pruitt, right?
The original.
To the OG priest. Yeah. So I have a feeling that that's possible, but the other one makes more sense thematically.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things going on here. One, it could be the vampire's influence, right? The vampire, like, if drinking the blood allows the vampire to influence you as your sire or potential sire, which I think we can agree with vampire lore it does, maybe he was making Bev do that. I will say there's one more reference to the rat poison, and it's in the montage in episode 3. There's a montage where like all the miracles start happening. Riley's dad and mom are dancing with each other, and his back doesn't hurt, and they're looking younger.
Yeah,
and
that's when she's taking the can.
They get to it.
That's when she's taking the can back into the storage unit, right?
Right. She puts it back, but so there's like the dog dying, and there's a very distinct like bloody froth that happens with this rat poison, and it looks the same. It looks the same with the dog. It looks the same with Pruitt. It looks the same with Sturge and everyone else who drinks the rat poison. So I think it's safe to say that's definitely the rat poison. Yeah. Bev is questioned by the sheriff, and she's putting the rat poison back. She's in the shed and she's putting the rat poison back, and she's questioned, and she acts indignant and stuff like that. And then during the montage, she puts the poison back. So maybe it's the vampire being like, you have to kill him kind of thing. What I actually think, and I don't think that's that likely though, I also find it weird that like the vampire wouldn't be telling the priest that he has to die.
Right.
Or just killing him himself, honestly. Doing it himself and then like informing him of everything. So again, I don't think the vampire, it's more like animalistic. It's not, it can kind of influence the priest, but can't tell him exactly what to do or what to expect. Because eventually the priest kills Joe, and it just kind of takes him, and he doesn't really know what's happening when he does it, right? He doesn't even understand the hunger, so the vampire doesn't alert him to anything. What I think is most realistic is the discussion about the oil disaster and the convention center. Mm-hmm. So there's an oil disaster that happens. The oil company offers a payout to everyone on the island, and Bev is very big on everyone accepting. She says everyone should accept this payout. Right. Then Bev convinces people to put that money back into the community and give it to the church. Now, Pruitt was still there at the time, but he was losing his mind. So
he was easy
Bev
to
already for a
manipulate,
long yeah, he had Alzheimer's. So Bev was already dictating like everything he did, probably hiding how bad the Alzheimer's was because the community didn't really know. And the priest talks about how they sent him to Jerusalem not knowing how sick he was. And then Joe, in that third episode, when he goes to AA, he talks about how he jokes and he's like, it's the Bev Keane Embezzlement Center. So she was in charge of church funds. Mm-hmm. She got this windfall from the oil company. She embezzled it through the
rec center,
convention center. And now there's this young priest who suddenly might look into like, why do we have a convention center on this island with 124 people when like that we've never used mm-hmm. and it's not quite finished and all this stuff. So maybe she was trying to hide. She was really worried about him finding out about her embezzlement and ratting her out.
So she tried to.
That seems to me. So she killed him instead. Yeah. Hoping that the next priest would be like older and wouldn't care or whatever. But this one, maybe she was where he's like, he's too capable. He's too involved. He's too on the nose. Yeah. People are going to tell him things.
I had another weaker theory. I think that is just as strong as them being in cahoots. But I have another weaker theory that I did.
But then like, why wouldn't they just like, I guess they wanted people to see it.
Right.
They needed to time it right. Why wouldn't he just be like in the room with them and then like they wouldn't know he's drinking rat poison? You know what I mean? He could just like drink and then he'd die and then come back.
So it does. It definitely seems like it's a slow progression, right? Maybe he was taking it in slow, in smaller doses until he just basically like crescendoed into the big chunk that he like just drinks all of a sudden. But I have another theory that also has to do with the miracles. Because in order for his plan to work, he definitely needs to recruit more than just Bev, right? Which is exactly what ends up happening. Mm-hmm. By the extension of the first miracle that happens, which is Lisa, walking again, to the next miracle, which is like people starting to they become younger. The mom of the doctor, what's her name, Mildred, becoming younger and healthier as time goes along. Oh, that's so Lisa and then the community. And then he needed one last miracle to really kind of nail this home, like bring it home. And that's why when he dies, it happens in front of the mayor, the mayor's wife, and the Sturge. All key players. Sturge has control of the entire island, basically. They can lock it down. He can lock it down. He can enable it. He calls the boats. He can fix the boats. He can break the boats. The mayor, of course, having the mayor authority, the wife. So all these key players are basically all concentrated in the same space. And he comes in to perform this last miracle to kind of really sell it to them that what is about to happen needs to happen the way that it's going to. People need to die in order to for the miracle to happen and for them to be brought back. And so he performs this in front of them. So all of this is an act for the priest that just kind of culminates in that act in that miracle to sell everything. And then from then on, everybody's on board. I don't know which one is stronger, to be honest. I don't know. I think to me that one feels a little bit weaker than the other ones. The problem that I have with your theory is that, okay, so let's say that she did try to cover up and try to kill him thinking that it was going to be fine. And then he comes back and nobody expected that. But you as the priest, wouldn't you be like, what the fuck? You try to kill me. Like, why? And then wouldn't you kind of like not have her in your circle anymore just because of the mistrust that she very rightfully has earned? Like, why would you continue to be associated with that person? At that point, when I find out that she tried to kill me, she would be my first victim. You know what I mean?
She's out. Yeah, right.
Yeah, she would be my first.
She's out of the loop.
My first poutine. So I don't,
right.
I don't know that works after that point. So I am left with just as many questions about how he comes to die.
The other issue I have with that is like, yeah, so like why just in front of the mayor and his wife? Why not have the rat poison that's water while he's delivering a sermon? Because he passes out and stuff. Like, he shows the whole community sick, but he only dies in front of those people. Why not die and come back in front of everyone? Because then everyone is going to be like, what the fuck? Oh my God, miracle man, right? Like, so many more people. And like, the more people that see it, the more people believe in it, and the easier a time he's going to have when like on Easter, when his plan comes to fruition. The other thing with Bev poisoning him and knowing about it in cahoots that I have a problem with is when he kills Joe, Bev finds him, and Bev is like cool with it because she kind of hates Joe, but she also, somehow she like clues into it, but without knowing. And it also seems like Pruitt himself doesn't really know. He's taken over by it. So one theory I have is that if enough of your blood is drained and replaced with the blood of the vampire, right? He didn't kill Pruitt, because if he killed Pruitt, he would have come back as a vampire and would never have been able to be in the light, never be able to travel. So my first theory, and still probably the one I go with, is that actually the poison is a red herring. Bev definitely poisoned the dog, but I actually think like that little bit in the montage that's like, whoa, this is what happened, total red herring. And I actually think just enough of the blood was replaced in the priest, and he was still, I presume, drinking it. Probably the vampire visited him every night and was like, yeah, keep drinking, like a lot.
Oh yeah, no,
right?
that's confirmed, because during I'll interrupt you just super quick. During the one of the scenes where the two kids are filling up all the materials for the church,
the flask.
Yeah, he has the flask. So now, if you remember, when he is in the rec center, kind of like very desperate, asking, where are you, like to the angel, demon, whatever.
It's like he's coming down, like an addict.
He's officially out of this blood supply for the community, and he is out of his own blood supply, because that's why he was pouring that flask into the little glass container, because when he was like, I don't have any more for them, I have my own, but I'm gonna go ahead and give them mine because I want to keep this going, right? And I know that the vampire is gonna come to me later. So he gives him his, and he's completely drained. That's why he's sick afterwards. Not necessarily the poison, but that's why he is like weak and toppling over, because he has officially given his own supply to everybody else. So that's part of it. Yeah.
So what I think happens is that if you have enough of it, constant supply, even though it does great things for you, the amount, like anything, like any medicine, Odin, whatever, the amount he was killing him. It ate the fetus, right? So obviously it is poisonous at some level to us. It does great things for us, but it's also poisonous to us at some level. Everybody was just getting a little bit on like Sunday or communion days or whatever. I think they end up going to church every day, so it amps up. But everyone was just getting a little bit of it, where he was getting a ton of it. He got a huge shot at first, but the vampire needed him to be alive so that he could travel in the sun and be in the daylight and affect this plan. So what I actually think is, if you have enough of it over time, it was the poison. It killed him. And it just had the same effect as the rat poison, as again, like a red herring kind of thing.
So one is just kind of like long period of time. One is at a much smaller scale, because both methods are necessary then. The people who had the blood, but not at the same length as the priest did, they die. They legitimately poison themselves. They die, and then they come back renewed. He could have just taken enough over time that it just poisoned him. The blood poisoned him, but the rat poison that they were using wasn't consequential. It was just kind of like a reason to speed up the process. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, it sped it up. Yeah, like if the vampire gave everybody the same amount of blood, drained them so much, and essentially replaced their blood with his own, and then kept that going, like, again, like it kills the fetus, right? Like it burned up the fetus to the point where like they can't even see that she was pregnant. So it destroys, the fetus wouldn't have had an immune system. It wouldn't have had any way to fight back. So it makes you stronger, but destroys you at the same time. So you don't see the effects of it until it's like, it's kind of too late.
Right.
Just where he was puking and it seems so stomach related, right? It just, for me, and like he was shocked by it is the other thing. Like he seemed really shocked by it.
Right.
So for me, I think like that blood is just poisonous to us. But in small doses, it's like, well, now my back doesn't hurt. My libido is back. My hair isn't gray anymore. You know what I mean? So it kills you as it heals you, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
On like a superficial level, it heals you. But on like a fundamental level, it's actually killing you.
Interesting.
And that makes sense to me because it's like the vampire is like the antithesis of us, right? It's the antithesis of a life. It's unlife. So it makes sense to me that it would poison. So that's kind of my leading theory, is that he died because he was taking the blood at such a increased level, such an increased frequency, so much of his own was removed. But the vampire, like, he knew, he's like, okay, obviously the vampire has control because he convinced him to take him to this place. But he knew enough, like, okay, I can't kill him because then he's instantly going to be allergic to the sun. Like, and I think that plays through with like Riley. Like he kills Riley and he has to feed Riley because Riley hasn't been taking communion. And so maybe that makes him like less powerful over him. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
anyway,
I think there's definitely something to that.
Yeah, I kind of like our theories though. Like I think I like both. I don't think I have one that I would be like more over than the other. Either way,
yeah, for me it's like the embezzlement thing and Bev killed him, or it's the vampire thing. Those are like the two leading ones for me. I just don't, the way they were surprised and the way that like Bev was like, oh, it's okay that you killed Joe, it's fine,
yeah,
it's okay, you work miracles kind of thing. I just don't think they were in on it together, you know. And again, Bev had to like convince him. He didn't feel bad necessarily, because I thought this was very funny too. There's an argument that he makes with Riley because they talk for a long time. They talk all day because he has to convince Riley. Yeah. And he says like, do you feel guilty now that you have like a full stomach and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, yeah, no, like you're confusing God with like hangry, you know, like a full tongue. It's like, he's like, don't you feel good? Do you feel guilty? You don't feel guilty anymore, right? You're just like, you got a full stomach. You're full of God. It's like, nah, he's just full. I get hangry, you know?
You're confusing.
My stomach hurts when I'm hungry. You're confusing hunger with like godliness. It's like everyone feels better when you ate a good meal.
I think, come on. I think the first way in how you put it is like you're confusing God with being angry.
Like, oh my God, come on. I think that is probably like the worst line in the entire show. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, everyone is like this when they're hangry. What are you talking about? Everything is worse, you know?
All right.
All right. Let's transition to... There are lots of other good characters, but they are very, very minor. Joe in particular is very good. I think the best line in the whole show is... and I won't go over it too much, but Joe is now... He wants to be a recovering alcoholic. Mm-hmm. He was an alcoholic. He made a terrible choice. He made a terrible decision, which... is how the girl ended up in the wheelchair. He ended up shooting her while he was drunk. She comes in and she delivers probably the best monologue in the entire show, the most powerful one, talking about hate and forgiveness. Like, props to that young girl.
Yeah.
For, I don't know, she's probably 20. She's actually probably a woman. Oh, but she looks very young. That's phenomenal. And she's supposed to be a teenager. But it's just phenomenal job that she does with that acting. Oh, one of the best lines for me is with Joe, and they come from the AA, and they're about to leave. Joe and Riley are walking, and they're talking, and they're about to leave. And Joe asks Riley, who's been recovering for much longer, he says, does it ever get any better for guys like us? Mm-hmm. And I really liked Riley's answer. And I really, after the year and a bit that I had, I really resonated with that. That line, I was like, whoa. And I think Riley gave a great answer because I mean, it was my answer. He said that, and I said, no, not really. You know, it does, but it also doesn't. It's something you always have. It's something you're always carrying, and it's always there, and you're always going to have that. But how it affects you is different, and it's not better, but it's not worse.
Yeah, it's just different.
And it's not the same.
Yeah.
It's different. I guess some people would call it better, but it's just different. I think if everybody carries something, and it doesn't get better for you. Oh. But you know what? In the end, it did get better for Riley. He just had to die a horrible death.
I have a question. You mentioned something about the characters dressing up as older people, and I still don't know what that's about. Like, why is that? Why did you deduce? Why do you think they dress like that?
Oh, like why did they take like young actors and like make them older?
Yeah.
Oh, because it didn't look convincing when they were old, but they spent very little time being old because they look younger.
Because they get better. Yeah. Okay,
so
got it.
Yeah, so they like, you know, the reason they made Mildred, like, it's a very unconvincing old person.
Yeah, the makeup and everything
that they do on her, it's not convincing. She looks great when they take it all off and she's young again, right? Yeah. Like Riley's mom and dad look great when they're like their younger selves, you know. So I think the effect is more profound. Otherwise, they'd have to get a different actor to play the young version.
Yeah, I got that.
So I think it's the only option they had available to them.
Here's one thing. While we're on this topic, one really quick thing that I thought was kind of weird. I didn't see it. Now I could have missed it somehow, but I don't think Pruitt and Paul, I don't think they're the same actor. Like just with age makeup, I think they're different actors. But when I checked on IMDb, I couldn't find the actor that plays Pruitt.
I think if there's a picture of Riley and Pruitt as like the old guy and with a beard, and I think they just did like kind of a bad Photoshop job on him. I think they just digitally altered his face so he looks like a different guy. But I think it's just a picture of them.
Okay, so you were but see, that's weird again, because even on IMDb, he's not. What's his name? Hashim, or what's his name?
Hamish.
Oh, Hamish. He's not identified as Pruitt / John or Paul.
No, just Paul.
Just
right?
Paul. So who plays the older version of him? That's what I'm saying. I don't know who the actor is.
Right. In the middle, I think it is him. I
don't know, man. They look vastly different. Like if it is him, the makeup is like that would be the opposite of Mildred's makeup, because the makeup would be excellent.
You're right. I was thinking it was just pictures of him, but no, in the third episode when he's going through like the Passion of Paul or whatever, it's like, it's like the old guy wandering around. I think it's the same guy. I think it's the same guy, but maybe it's not. You would see it not on IMDb, but if you just like watch the show and go to the credits, it'll be like John Pruitt or whatever.